A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to session number 42 of our Sunday webinar series, which started on the 10th of May 2010. And it has been going on consecutively since then. And today's speaker is Priyanka.
Hi Vivek, hi Jyoti, hi Venkataraman and everyone. Hi. So I'm going to be presenting on translations, and I'll basically be talking like I was telling Vivek earlier. I'm not. This is not a business-oriented thing as such. I'm not going to be presenting any facts or figures or data, but I'll just be talking about my own experience and the kind of experiences I have had, and so the kind of experiences I've had, the kind of opportunities I've gotten, and what I have personally learned from those experiences and those opportunities as such. So, to begin with, I'm going to first talk about my journey as a translator to an editor and then to a translator. So, a lot of life as such is all about chances and serendipity. And I got into translations just when I was in college, and I was looking for a part-time gig because, again, like you want to make some money on the side, etc., etc. So I asked one of my teachers if she could direct me to something, and she needed a Premchand short story translated, and she asked me to do it. I at that point of time I didn't know that it was going to be published by OUP, and it was going to be part of a very prestigious collection. So I mean, I did it, and that was it. And after that, there were a couple of more things. So my one learning from that experience was don't I and I see this. And at in my I'm now in my late 30s, and I would say my biggest learning, and something I see a lot of people who are much younger doing, is that when they first get an opportunity, they're always trying to evaluate where it's going to get them, and what it's going to get, where it's going to get them. But sometimes that approach might prove counterproductive. Don't stop yourself from taking that first step, because you also need to just uh, you need a foot in the door basically, and sometimes that's what matters, just taking that first step. You don't always have to think where it might lead to. It might lead to something great, but just take that jump. So yeah, so that's how I got into translations, and I translated my first short story for, and yeah, again, and then after that, they again asked me to do a couple. I mean, my teacher asked me to do a couple of more teacher. Okay, so yeah. So yeah, so my teacher sort of gave me a couple of more assignments, and I did them. But that's also how I got into publishing as an editor, because they were looking for trainees, and since I translated for them, they knew. Again, it's also about knowing people, and that's how you also, like I said, you get a foot in the door. So that's what I did, and again, like that led to this first job as a trainee at OUP, and from there I sort of went on to work. I still continued working on a couple of translations, but after a while, I mean, anyone who's been in publishing knows how demanding it can get. So, and most people here are editors, so they would know how demanding and it is. So after a while, I stopped sort of, sort of couldn't make the time to do any more translation work, and I was focusing on my career as an editor and publisher. And it was only like after having been in that space for about 10 years that I realized that I missed that. that part of my work or my experience, or basically I miss translating. So I spoke with someone at with Nirmal at Nyogi Books, and he sort of again he wanted something. He wanted a story by Chitra Mutkal translated, which turned out to be Gilly Gadu. So again, I started working on it while I was at Konark. Then again, it was getting very difficult, and yeah, I'd also been there for about for longer for almost for more than 6 years actually. So again, so that was when I decided that I really wanted to focus on this, and I wanted to freelance. So a lot of things just worked out in that sense, and I quit my job and I started freelancing. And yeah, I mean, I didn't, again, like, it's not like I had made a lot of plans in that sense. Like, I hadn't really planned that, okay, now that I've started freelancing, I'm going to work here or there, or these are going to be the places I'll work for, or I've lined multiple projects. No, it was all like this, literally. So, got into it. The only thing I had in my hand at that point of time was this translation Nyogi for Nyogi books, which was Giligadu. Finished that, and then so it took about a year to get published, and after that, again, it was again serendipity sort of kicked in, and after about a year, I was having a chat with Arpita Das of Yora Press, and she asked me what I was working on at that point of time. Again, I was like, I've just finished doing this book, it's come out, but haven't really thought of anything yet. So she's like, okay, why don't you think of something and let me know, and maybe we can talk about it. So yeah, and as I was, so I said okay, and then I was leaving, and I was almost at the door when I just turned around and said, "What about Shivani? Would you be?" And Shivani, as I mean, people who are in the Hindi space would know, is considered one of the biggest names. So again, I don't think Arpita was very convinced I would get the permissions. So she said, "Yeah, sure. I mean, we'll figure it out. I'll put you in touch with her daughter who handles the permissions, and we'll sort of go from there." So we did that again. Ira sort of she asked me to send her a sample. Again, another learning. No matter where you are at life, no matter what, please do not hesitate when it comes to sending samples or writing tests. I still write tests all the time. So yeah, there's nothing wrong in that, I would say. Then, and I see that there's a lot of hesitation around that, which is why I'm mentioning this. So, and hesitation, reluctance, like a lot of people don't want to do that, but it doesn't hurt you in any way. So again, and that conversation led to this book. So yeah, so that happened, and and from there, yeah, then it again led to various other things. I'm now working with Sangam House, which is a writer's residency. I'm also sort of again, people from Rajasthan, please to take note, or people who know Rajasthani writers. We've started a thing called which has been started by the this thing Rama Mehta trust, which is for Rajasthani women first time writers who've not been published, unpublished Rajasthani women writers. So again, it's about promoting. So again, it's all, and again, like if you're getting into translations as such, especially literary translations, don't really pay much. So yeah, it's not like you can eke out a living just saying, okay, I'm just going to translate all day and sorted. No. life will not be sorted. It's a lot more work than editing is, and but I mean the pay is, I mean, compared to that, it's okay. But a lot of places don't also offer royalties, so that's another thing. Sorry, not royalties. What am I saying? Advances. So then it sort of makes that thing of a 1 year cycle, because if you're not getting upfront advances, you've done this work, but you're waiting for for more than a year, and you don't know how much you will be paid for it. So again, it's when it comes, it's a bonus, but otherwise, it's not something you can count on. While if you're editing, you know that you've had this conversation with whoever you're editing for, and that person, that amount is guaranteed. You will get X amount, or even if you're taking in advance, then you sort of do the math there. But with translations, it's going to be a 1 month, a 1 year cycle, or sometimes some people also commission. So again, in terms of opportunities, I've seen that there are literary translations, and then there are these commercial gigs that you get. And again, it sort of varies, because even in literary translations, there is the royalty model. So then there are, even within the royalty model, you will either get an advance, or you might not. So there are these two different models there. Then there is another model within literary translations, or within publishing as such, which is that you'll be commissioned to work on it, but you're paid an upfront fee. Okay. N- and the thing there is that with advances, if there are later on, if there are movie rights or any other language rights which are sold, you will get a share in that. But if you're paid that upfront fee, which might be a little higher than the advance you might have been paid had you taken up that model, the so it might be a little higher, but you're also giving up your rights as a translator. You're giving away your copyright when you do that upfront payment. If you take up that upfront payment thing, so then you're just being paid for. I mean, it's not quite ghost translations, because you will be credited for the work. Okay, you will be credited as the translator, but yeah, I mean, you don't own the copyright on the copyright page. It will not be your name. And yeah, I mean, again, in terms of royalties, you're not going. Usually royalties are split between the author and the translator. So it's usually 10% is the average royalty, that is royalty percentage that's paid. But if it's a translation, it's 5% to the translator, and 5% to the author. But if it's an upfront payment, that's it. You're just given that fee, which is on the basis of which is usually a rate thing, like it's either a 3 or a 4 a rupee per word thing. So yeah, so that's the model there. And with commercial translations, again, it's usually corporate. These. So again, there you might be asked by an author to translate a source material for them, which is something I have done. So yeah, there might be some source material, they might need help with it. So you translate it for them. Again, that's a conversation you have with the author. There won't be any copyright there, of course, because you just it's basically a fee thing that's done. Then hmm. Then yeah, there are NGOs that who sometimes need data or documents. Who need documents translated. So there is that. Then companies at times need documents edited. So sorry, translated. God, I'm just so used to saying edited that that's become my default setting. But yeah, so that's what you do. So these are the kind of opportunities I've seen that have opportunities that have come up. Again, like I would say that needs to be a bigger push for this, because in a lot of places I've seen that there might be great writers, but they're not writers they're not writers who are comfortable with English. So, and I've tried pushing for this. I've asked a lot of these organizations, a lot of organizations I work for, why they're insisting on getting the document written in English when it would be much easier for me as the editor, or as some, or even as a writer, to just write it in the vernacular language, like, sorry, not vernacular, the regional language, write it in Hindi or write it in Bangla or write it in, Malayalam or whatever, and then get it translated by someone else and then edit it. But unfortunately, as a country, we are very fascinated with English. So, yeah, so there is that. But yeah, so what else? Oh gosh, we are only at 20 minutes. So yeah, so that has been my journey overall. And yeah, I would say keep a mixed bag. It don't try to say, okay, don't. I hesitate from doing that. Like, typecasting yourself and saying, oh, I'm only going to be this kind of a translator or this kind of an editor, and I'm not going to. Because I've seen that more than anything else, all kinds of experiences enrich your experience. So you always learn from something. So, like, I was so one of the after Gilly Gadu, I was also, I did some translation work for a no. So this was a non-fiction book, and I translated some material for the author, and this was my first experience of translating non-fiction. So again, like, I could have just said, oh, and I'm honestly saying that I love reading fiction in my free spare time. That's what I do. And nonfiction is something I've worked on as, I mean, I'm guessing most people here are Indian editors. They would know that in India, mostly what we see getting published is nonfiction. So I've done a lot of nonfiction editing, and at what point of time there was this thing where I just didn't. I was like, oh, I'm so tired of only editing nonfiction. But what do I do? And then this thing comes up, and I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. Never done this. No, until then I had, thankfully, fortunately, translated stuff that I really enjoyed reading also. So this was something which was different. Was out of the purview of things I usually enjoy. So I was like, okay, let's give this a shot. And again, it was fun in its own way, because you get to know about something that's very different. And this was actually for yeah. Um, I guess I can mention the names now. This was some material for Operation X. So yeah, and it was from Bangla to English, which is again a slightly different ball game for me, because I grew up. I mean, I'm more comfortable with Hindi than I am with Bangla. So did that, and that taught me how to translate non-fiction, because it's again like entirely different experience. So when I was translating Shivani. Now, with Shivani, most of you would, I mean, whoever has read Shivani would know that of course, she writes about, I mean, about her protagonists and her. There are these multiple characters. And there's lot happening. There is this great searing romance, which I don't think is romance. It's a way of showing like how strong women can be, and because most of the men are useless. No offense meant to any of the men here. And yeah, so it was great. But then there are these hugely descriptive passages where she's only talking about, talking about the hills and their culture, and this one does this. And so I guess, I mean, and that's something I was talking to one of my editor friends about, that that sort of that experience of having translated nonfiction kicked in there. And yeah, I mean, it really helped me because I was first of first when I first read it, I was like, holy crap, how do you translate something like this? This is so different. Because the way I have been working was like, you read the thing, you sort of absorb it, and then tell the story. You sort of translate it in your own words in English. So, and I was like, okay, this is going to be different because you need to be with nonfiction, you have to be very particular about catching each and every detail. So I was like, okay, so what do you do now? But then again, like since I had this experience, it helped, and I was like, no, I'm just going to be, I can do this. I've done this before. It's all right. So, I mean, again, that experience also helps you have more confidence in your own work. So yeah, that was one time when I really felt like, okay, it was a good thing to not have said no to that opportunity. So I would say never say no to something. Always try and have an open mind about opportunities. Again, the fact that I've been an editor also helps a lot in my own work as a translator, because I know what things should sound like. You know more about flow, about also it having been in publishing, I also know about certain back what could have happened behind the scenes, like in terms of editorial. I guess this is no big secret that in Hindi publishing, at least earlier, most publishers would just commission the manuscripts and get as when the authors send them, they publish them directly with after doing just basic editing and proofreading and all of that. And that's also one of the reasons why for most I mean, of course, it's changing now, but earlier you wouldn't really find very detailed author notes, etc., because the authors would just send it and you just put them and send it to press. That's what happened. But yeah, so, but I mean, having been in publishing, I knew that this is the background. So it also helps you understand certain things. Like, I mean, there were times when in this story, or I mean, even in Chitra Mudgal, there were places where I fumbled and I was like, wait a second, this is what it was in the last few pages. Why is this like this? Yeah. Or, why is the style suddenly changing? Or, you have all these questions even when you're looking at a manuscript and just reading it. But I knew that this is okay, this is what the background was. It's all right. I'm not reading it wrong. Nothing happened there. But just this, like suddenly you would find like paragraphs that are miles long, something as basic and simple as that. And then you're wondering why, like, is this the same thing? What's happening? Why is this character? And again, in Shivani, there were times when you're not very clear about which character is being spoken of, or who is being addressed. But you realize that this is what has happened. That I mean, her writing was initially published in a serialized manner, and once, and they were only put together after a while. So it's okay, like the text is important, it is sacrosanct in a way, but these things can be addressed. It's no biggie. So yeah, um, so yeah, being an editor helped in that. Then even while I'm translating, I sort of do, okay, this quote is beginning here, where is it ending? So you automatically, these things just come so naturally to you after a while that you don't even think about what you're doing, but you are doing those things. And okay, I mean, I hope I'm not coming across as someone who's really like just pulling things out but of her head. But and I hope this has been helpful. But I think what might if you guys have any questions, please do sort of put them across. And I mean, is there, Vivek, do we have any questions yet?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, but
Okay,
yeah, please. Yeah.
excuse me. I want to present to the ICF group Sumit Ranjan, who has just been able to register his Anuvad Junction. And he's been a colleague of mine a long time ago. So, Sumit, if you will tell about your experience and interact with Priyanka, because you're both translators,
Mhm.
and I have a very happy experience of him as my colleague.
Sure, definitely. Sumit,
That's,
can we please see you?
yeah, here I am.
No, no,
Here,
Sumit. I can't see
yeah.
Sumit.
So, yeah, I also am asking him to.
Sumit,
Uh,
can you please?
Anuvad Junction sounds very interesting to me.
Yeah, it does. What is it? Please tell us about Anwar Junction and about your work.
Anyway,
I,
I'm
Sumit.
going to message him. Maybe
Yeah, yeah, I think he's
here
just.
he's, yeah,
He's
he's
just
coming. He's coming.
here.
Yeah,
Can we
yeah,
also see you, please?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hello,
Here he
everyone.
is. Okay.
Yeah, I think the video was unstable at my end, so I couldn't join early. So yeah, I worked with Kanis ma'am at Manjul Publishing House. I was working as an assistant editor, and since last 7 years, I've been working as a translator, editor, proofreader, and I have translated around 3 to 4 books, mainly self-help category books. And recently, I've just got my proprietorship in the name of Anuvad Junction registered. So I'm just starting up as an agency, a sort of agency you can say. So mainly, I was working into the localization sector. Yeah, people think that translation and localization are the same thing, but very few know the minute difference between the two. So just I'm trying to make a balance between both of them and be an active member in both the fields, because very few will understand that there is a major difference between the two processes. So
Sorry, between what?
between localization and translation.
Localization and translation. What do you mean by localization?
Localization, I believe, is more of like it is a bigger package into the it is a mixture of translation, content writing, and advertising, marketing. There you have to present a whole content into the local background, considering the target audience. While in translation, we just have to convert the language, not considering the background of the local. Like if we have to translate a tagline of an advertisement into from English to Hindi, so translation would mainly it consider it to be translated in Hindi regardless of which Hindi region it is going into. Like Hindi is differently spoken in Kolkata. Hindi is differently spoken in the northern belt. But look, when it is coming to localization, it is an ad is to be localized into Hindi content. Then the same content will go in different format in the northern belt, and it might be presented in a different way in the south or in Kolkata.
Yeah,
So yeah, that is the basic difference.
hmm. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sumit, but do you translate from English into local languages, or or is it also? I mean, do you also translate from local languages into English?
I do from English to Hindi mostly. Sometimes I get some work for Hindi to English also. That also I do, but mostly English to Hindi only.
Mostly English to Hindi. Yeah, I think what you're saying is probably because I mean English again tweaking English to so according or adjusting English to certain to local sensibilities as such will is not really possible because Yeah, but I would say like it's truer for local languages. So this is definitely very informative that you sort of also take into consideration which uh, the location of the target audience into account when you're translating into Hindi or I guess any local language.
Yeah, because just one more thing I wanted to discuss that mostly when when a fresher comes into this industry, into the translation field, either like he's interested into literature, or he's into he has done his post graduation in Hindi or any other language to go into the government jobs for a translator. So
Mhm.
very few people know that localization can also be a good career option apart from the literary translation that we are doing. So I think that like if Vivek sir could bring up this topic at some later stage, that localization can also be one of our discussions in some other video.
Mhm. Yeah, I
That
think Vivek should take that into account. And I mean, I would love to know more about localization and what it entails because this seems very fascinating that, you know, you're writing keeping in mind a certain region and yeah, I mean, how to do it and what it entails and what the opportunities are there. So yeah.
Yeah,
One of
Priyanka,
the
we can.
things, excuse me, one of the things that I had to do at Manjul is that
Mhm.
Manjul has a very large number of translations of
Mhm.
self-help books and other books.
Hmm.
Um, you'd have to see their website to see how many books they have translated, and they have a very major thrust into Bengali, into Telugu, into so many languages. So what
Mhm.
I had to do was I would have to take some books of self-help and edit them so they could be translated more easily, because
Hmm.
sometimes the reference in the English book is something that if it's translated it will not ring a bell. So
Yes.
it, and sometimes the words in English are not familiar enough for the translator to be able to translate them into a regional language. So
That's
that was
true.
that I had to do. And I remember there was something about Fun with Dick and Jane, which is a basic reader in the US for English. And there's a little girl named Sally, and the translator person in the office was writing it as Sally. So I said, no, her name is Sally. Now, that is also a difficult thing because the orthography for Sally in Hindi
Mhm.
doesn't come out
Yeah.
very clearly.
Sally.
And
It will either be Sally or Sally. So yeah.
yeah, so that a sound of English doesn't come in Hindi easily.
Hmm.
And even the Chandramarki Bindu and all the rest of it, I myself am rather, I mean, Sumit knows that I learned to read Hindi at the age of 59. So
Oh, wow.
I'm not, but I learned it only because I know I learned to read the Hindi because when I saw the translations of the books that I had simplified to say it in very simple words, was not coming out right. So then I would read and I would say, oh, that's not what we want to say. We want to say an X word or a Y word. And basically, it is the difference of the vowels. So
Mhm.
orthography is an intense part of how we take English words or French words or Swedish words and Manjul is doing them all. They are translating in many languages. So people who are interested in translation should contact Manjul, because though they have people in house, they have enough work for freelancers also. I'm not with Manjul anymore. I'm just giving you this as a hint.
Yeah, this is not a sales pitch. That's all right. No, no, we get that.
Thanks.
But
Thanks.
yeah, and there has actually been a lot of interest in translations of late, and yeah, the people. I mean, a lot of publishers have suddenly like realized that there is a huge market there, and they can sort of, and it's happening across the board. So yeah, a lot of translators and even audiobooks. Audiobooks are also really interested in translations now. I've worked with a few of them, and I would say that if you have any pieces that you have translated or written, do it. Even and if they're short pieces, you might not get a traditional publisher for it, but take into account that there are other opportunities also available now. So there are audiobooks, there are ebooks that you can do. So I mean, yeah, it's really, and yeah, Manjul is a great place to send your work to. You can, or you can just contact them and ask them. So, and yeah, there are other publishers too who are interested in sort of getting their books translated or doing simultaneous publishing. So,
Priyanka, there is a question from Anagha Wankhede.
hmm,
So she is saying, I'm just starting out as an editor and translator, and I
hmm,
have mostly done ghost writing jigs, ghost translating jigs.
huh.
So, what are the best practices for building your portfolio as an editor translator with these kind of assignments? When
Hmm.
you are not actually credited, you don't get the credit.
Credit. See, you can always mention it when you're sort of seeking work that this is what I've done. But again, like I said, I'm not a great believer in like, I mean, I started the discussion with that I'm not a great believer and in deciding or charting out a very set thing and saying this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to go about it. Really believe in just leaving everything to chance as such. I mean, work hard, no doubt about that. Like whatever you get, do it to the best, to your best possible abilities. But I don't really believe in that whole regimented. Okay, this is my plan and this is my this is my action plan and I'm going to follow it. Or or like I mean, I don't even have a plan, I would say, and sometimes it's just best to leave it to chance and just take every opportunity that you get and try to make the most of it, learn from that opportunity, try and learn from every little experience that you have and try and use it in the next time you get. um, and again, so yeah, for ghostwriting stuff, I would say they can again be a great learning experience. Don't hesitate from mentioning it. Maybe if that's all you're doing right now, I mean, if you're only editing and publishing, translating, ghost translating, what we have started calling ghost translating now. Mention it when you next seek out work, or mention it in your CV. Say that these are the things I've done, and yeah, that's it. And just reach out to as many people as you want and as you can, and then after you've done a few, you have that thing. Just try and suggest it to the publisher that you be credited for the work, because sometimes you can do these collaborative things where the author is mentioned, but you're also credited as the translator on the cover page, where they say that you are the translator and you will still be paid for it. You don't It doesn't need to be, it can then fall under that category of upfront payment, but where you are credited for the thing, for the work that you've done.
Thank you, Priyanka. That's quite helpful.
I'm glad to have been of help, but yeah, anyone else, any questions? Yes, Moshmi. Hi.
I'm Ashmi, and it was really very interesting uh, listening to you talk about your experiences. I
Sorry.
was just wondering, is it
Can you please be
loud
louder? I'm
enough?
a little deaf. I mean, and I do. I mean, not.
No, I think my mic has been giving me problems since yesterday. Okay, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
Okay. So it's been very interesting talking, I mean, and listening to, not me talking, you have been talking, and others. But I was just thinking while you were talking about your experiences, are you thinking about translation theory when you are translating? I mean, there's a whole academic
oh,
background to it. And are you
yeah.
like thinking, okay, should I translate it according to this theory or that theory? I don't know what theory,
Okay.
but
So
is
yeah,
that
this is
something?
again. It's interesting that you asked me this question, because I have a lot of friends who are academics, and I've had this discussion with them, and they of course think in terms of theory, and this is what it is. And But again, there I would say my training as an editor kicks in, and I translate as an editor and not as an academician. Okay, so it's not about, okay, so this piece was set in this era, so my English needs to reflect that. No, I just go by what on earth do my readers want to read. Is this something my readers like? It's about making, as an editor, that's what you're constantly doing. You're trying to make you're trying to make the text as palatable as possible for your readers.
Right.
So even as a translator, that's what I'm doing. It's like, will they find it interesting? Would they like to read this? And of course, without, again, but you're also translating something that is already there, so you can't change too much. It's not like I can change the plot and be like, hey, this isn't working here, so let me change that. No, you can't do structural edits, you can't do development edits. The only thing that you can do is probably what we would call line edits without really changing them. So you have to remember that the meaning needs to stay the same, but the English needs to be smoother, it needs to read well, it needs to be interesting. Just try and catch the descriptions. So which is why I said that my style is that I read the text and then I'm like, okay, write it in your own words and say exactly the same things but in English. And
Okay,
yeah.
I get that. Thank you. I have one more question, if I
Yes.
may. So I I'm right now a freelance editor, but previously I was working with Tulika Chennai with the Children's Publishing House. So one of the things as a person who was handling the translation for various books, I was coming across was that some things are untranslatable.
Yeah.
Okay, we had to drop a book because there was a gender problem. This was a book, I think it's Nivedita Subramaniam, Soda and Wanda. I think I can say this is a private forum. We had to drop the English translation because, the translation was just not working out. The languages we were translating into were highly gendered words, and the meaning was coming across as completely different from the English original. So, have you come across something like this?
See, I've not really had a problem with gender as such, but I had translated something that was really, I mean, it was Neil Prabha Bharadwaj's, I translated The Old Man and I mean, again, this was almost a decade ago, more than a decade ago now, but yeah, it was Neil Prabha Bharadwaj's The Old Man and the Photograph, and I have never been happy with that translation, though. I mean, I've been told that it reads just fine and I should stop fussing over it. But again, it was, it has that very oral quality. And I mean, the reason I'm unhappy about it is because I really feel like it's not been able to catch. There was something in that text which I've not been able to translate into English. I mean, it's again, there is this whole thing of fear, I mean, the emotions basically. And because it's not a very straightforward text, it's basically, there are a lot of ellipses, half spoken sentences, then there is this, I mean, there's a lot going on there, but yeah. But yeah, I've never really had any of these problems with gender, or I mean, I haven't really encountered that yet. I would probably just say, like in Shivani, in this one, there were things like Aghori Sadhus or Shamshan Ghats and some. I mean, yeah. So there again, you look at the context and you say, okay, can I use cremation grounds here, or do I need to say Shamshan Ghat? So you look at the context and sort of change gears accordingly, or you sort of, I mean, like Ramdas Kirtanya. So, I mean, if I were to translate it, I would have to give like an entire passage on what a bloody Ramdas Kirtanya is, right? But that doesn't make sense because it also, either I give like enormously long footnotes and somebody who's reading it would be like, why do I need to know this? So again, so what I have done is, and which is increasingly being followed, I mean, Sarah would probably be in a better position to comment on this. But internationally, also, they are increasingly not sort of being apologetic about local languages, and you just put in the word and expect people to Google and find out, because like the entire world is now on Wikipedia or on Google. So if you want to know what a Ramdas Kirtaniya is, please Google it. So you just leave it as that.
Thank you. Oh, and one correction, we had to drop the other languages. It was English which actually went, the other English languages. I mean, the other regional languages we had to drop the translation. I think I didn't say that accurately.
Oh, okay. So it was the other way around.
Yeah, it was going from English to 8 Indian languages, but yeah, so I think it went, the Hindi was the most problematic.
I've never really done much. I haven't really translated much from English into Hindi. So
I wasn't translating, I was just the editor.
Yeah,
so, but yeah, handling it was,
yeah, but
you just
I mean,
figure out.
also the translators call in a way you can. I mean, as editors, we can only suggest. So yeah.
Thank you.
Suggest it, then insist. As yeah. So, any more questions, or do we call it a day? Vivek?
Yeah, we would like to hear from Sarah what are her thoughts on some of the questions that were asked and maybe how she would respond to those questions.
Well, first of all, thank you, Priyanka, for such an interesting talk.
Thank you, Sarah. You're quite kind.
Fascinated to hear about the Indian context. I don't know anything about, the situation for translators in India. I found it very interesting because I actually did my PhD on literary translation.
Oh, okay.
But after I graduated, I ended up becoming an academic editor, and then I've started doing translation again. That's mainly for business and academia, not literature. Okay. And as you say, literary translation is pretty similar, I think, in Japan. Most people who do literary translation are affiliated with some university, and they do that on the side of their academic jobs. So, the issue with royalties and the lack of advances and things like that, it's not really an economically viable, stable job for a freelancer. But yeah, when I was at university, I, did a lot of study of the theory, translation theory. And of course, when I started working, I realized just what a mismatch there was between theory and practice in the translation world. And one of the interesting series I really enjoyed reading about was Laurence Vernuti's Translators' Invisibility. Any of you read Laurence Vernuti? Yeah. So he talks about domestication and foreignization practices in translation. And basically, it's like post-colonial theory as well. So it's all about whether, especially in the English language publishing world, there is a tendency to translate things so they just read like English. So the objective for, publishers want stuff that just sounds like something that was written by a native English speaker. And Laurence Vernuti criticizes that, and says this is a part of colonization, and a part of sort of erasing the original text. Because why should readers be reading something without any kind of doubt or, any discomfort? Why do we have to naturalize everything and make it all sound like a native English text? Of course, that's very difficult to argue in the commercial world or in the literary publishing world, where your translations are just not going to get picked up if you make it too academic, or if you try and put too many of the original language in. But it is an issue that I'm still grappling with. I haven't found any answers for it, but it's a question of whether you bring the text to the reader or you bring the reader to the text.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of forcing the reader to confront the text a bit more. So like with film, for example, it's like if you watch a film that's dubbed in American English, where these Korean drama people are all speaking in American English, as opposed to if you watch it in the original Korean with subtitles, it's a completely different experience. And in the same way, if I ever do go back to literary translation, I'd like to confront that issue, and challenge that issue a bit more. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to do that. But yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that issue as well. And, whether, as you said, in the English language world, recently, we don't even italicize a lot of foreign terms anymore, which is, I think, a really cool trend, that we just treat words like,
Words.
people should know them. They're words, and there's always Google or a dictionary for people to look it up. So that's a really, promising trend. But in my thesis, I also looked at the problems of translating onomatopoeia, for example, problems of translating dialect. I mean,
Yes.
One of the stories I was looking at had a lot of stuff, dialect from, I should call them varieties, not dialect. Dialect sounds a bit derogatory, but, non-standard varieties from northern Japan. And do I translate that into standard, British, Australian or American English? Do I translate it into Southern American or, like a Geordie accent from and the other problem is I don't have the ability to write in those non-standard varieties either. Yeah. But by translating something in non-standard Japanese and from this, very poor country region of northern Japan into the Queen's English, or the King's English, it didn't make sense. You lose that. And the same thing happened with, for instance, there are different translations of Lady Murasaki's Tale of Genji. But, for example, the first famous translation is by Arthur Waley, who translated it into like the British court kind of, sort of landed gentry kind of language, which, and it's a beautiful translation. It's not very accurate, but it reads very nicely, right? And then, you have people like Seidensticker or Donald Keane who write in more of a, East Coast 1960s American English. And is that really suited to, Lady Murasaki's Tale of Genji from medieval Japan? And then you have even more, academic translations with lots of footnotes explaining things. But then from the reader's point of view, from the average reader's point of view, if you're not an academic, you don't really want to be sifting through lots of footnotes either. So I think it's a challenge that's impossible to resolve completely. But these are issues that I think that every translator has in the back of their mind when they're grappling with, localizing. I think of all translation as localizing a text into another language and another culture and another readership, and whether that readership is going to be an American audience, an Australian audience, or a British audience as well. We all have this imaginary English speaking audience in mind when we're translating. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much.
No. Hajime mashite. Watashi no name wa I don't remember too much more Japanese.
You know more Japanese than I know Hindi or Urdu or Bangla. Yeah, but
your insights are very useful, and your experience and your whole idea about translation and the fact that there are so many Englishes and there are so many different kinds of languages. I don't think dialect is derogatory. I think dialect is fine, but we call them regional languages, and there are dialects because our languages in India, we have more languages than they have in Europe. So they have their own structure, their own script. And let me tell you, it is easier for someone who knows Tamil to learn Japanese than any other Indian language because of the sentence structure.
Wow.
That is right. That is
I was hoping to move to Singapore and learn Tamil there. So that's very nice to know that Tamil might be not so difficult for me to learn.
Absolutely. Okay. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no.
I'm a chatterbox.
Oh my.
Sarah, in terms of translating dialects and stuff, this book Shivani has a lot of these different, there is a very Sanskritized or very proper Hindi, then there is very conversational Hindi, then there are people who are breaking into Bangla, so then there is the Kumaoni Hindi, which is again like a variant of Hindi. So again, in the Hindi, there were a lot of these changes. So I would say, fine. The way I went about it was marking them, not glossing over them. I mean, I didn't say that. Okay, but at one point of time, you'd sort of say that these characters spoke to each other in Bangla, or these, she said this in Kumaoni Hindi, or you sort of, if there are like I find it very uncomfortable. I find translating poetry or verses uncomfortable because I don't have that sense of rhythm.
Translating poetry is impossible for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I don't even know what the beat is supposed to be. How am I going to translate it? So I would just say, I mean, so what I usually do is just paraphrase when it comes to poetry.
Yeah.
You mentioned I mentioned the original and then I sort of translate it. Well, for on the point where about the thing where you said that, you made that comparison with films and text, I would say that I would say there is a bit of a difference because with films, it's already being processed in a way for the consumer, so to speak, for the audience. Whereas when it comes to reading, it is the reader who has to sort of make that effort of, and reading is very different from watching. Watching, I mean, you can sort of switch off in a way when you're watching something. So
More
that's
passive.
yeah, it's a
experience.
more passive kind of consumption. Whereas in reading, you have to engage with the text. You're also constantly imagining what is like. That's what I do when I'm reading something. I'm also imagining what's there, which is why we love descriptions of things so that we can sort of have it down to every little detail. But when so which is why I'm not very comfortable with sort of translators also doing all these kinds of I would say I would smoothen it a bit, and I would sort of say that but again, a bit. I mean, I'm not going to make it sound absolutely like, oh my God, this was actually just written in English. I don't know why you would call it a translation. No, I mean, it is a translation. You mentioned the Hindi words, and I mean, not, I mean, in my case, it would be Hindi. For anyone, it would be like whichever regional language they're translating from. Have those nuances, have those things, but I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult for your readers to sort of access the writing either.
One thing is that in Japanese, from translations from English or another foreign language into Japanese, in Japanese, there is this register. It's like called the translation register. So when you're reading a translated book like Harry Potter in Japanese, you're very aware that it's a translation. It's like watching a film with subtitles. It's that kind of style. It's the translation style that we don't have in English, I think. Translated books in English just read like English. But in Japanese, it's quite normal to read a translated book and to be fully aware it's a translation and enjoy it as a translation. And I would also give the example, I know that film is quite different, but for example, do you know the film Train Spotting? Yeah. So the beginning of that, the monologue, Renton's monologue that Ewan McGregor gives was originally done in like a Glaswegian kind of, so an accent from Glasgow, very heavy. It's beautiful. But the US version of that film dubbed it because they decided it was too difficult for fellow English speakers to understand. The Australian version didn't. Same thing with Crocodile Dundee. The US version of Crocodile Dundee dubbed a lot of the Australian actors English because they thought it would be too hard for US audiences to understand. So that's something that, American audiences are not so aware of because that's just the film that they get in the US. Whereas in Australia, we don't get dubbed English films. We get British English films, get US English films, and it's quite normal for us. And if for some reason it might be difficult to understand, there might be some, surtitles on the film. So yeah, I just think that it's kind of interesting that even though it is film and film is quite different, you do have the visual image to help your understanding. It's quite different as to how we judge how much a reader or a viewer is willing to go to understand something. And I think that the US version of films or the way they conceive their audience is that they're not going to accept something that sounds too foreign, even if it's in English. No. And I know, I think that's a bit sad, because then, your world becomes a bit smaller, right?
Yes,
That's true.
Even
That's
within the English world. And I mean, I think it's changing now, even in the, I don't want to just criticize the US. It was just an example of, filmmaking. But it's the same in Japan. Often there's surtitles on non-standard Japanese varieties from around Japan when they're even interviewing people, as older people in the countryside, for example. And sometimes I need surtitles to understand, Aussie accents in country pubs and things like that. My partner doesn't, because he's comes from a very, Aussie background. But my parents didn't speak like that. And my school was, in the city. So I'm not very used to hearing these sort of country accents. And but I enjoy hearing it, and if I have surtitles, it's fine. I don't need to have it dubbed into, standard Aussie English. So I don't know what the situation, though, is like in India. Does everyone understand all different kinds of Hindi, or are there some regions where you might need surtitles or some help to understand what they're actually saying, even if it's the same Hindi?
So I'll tell you this, it's very interesting. I mean, this is actually something that really that happened with me. I mean, I know Bangla, but there is this, the Bangla we speak is the kind of Bangla that people who have so we are Provashi. I mean, it's a certain kind of city Bangla. While one of my friends, and we were flatmates, and she came from Sylhet. And so this one time, her mother and her mother's sisters had come over, and Sylhet is again, it's what they're speaking is Bangla, but so they start talking among themselves, and I kid you not, for about, and they were discussing something among themselves, and for half an hour I had this blank look on my expression because I couldn't follow a word of what they were saying. And it was all Bangla, but it wasn't it just didn't sound like Bangla at all. So, yeah, I mean, so I've had that experience with Bangla, but not with Hindi. Now it could be because, I mean, my Bangla isn't really as good as I would like to believe it is. Or it could just be that, I mean, I haven't really encountered a variant of Hindi which I haven't been able to follow, but Bangla I definitely have. Right. And that was quite an experience because I was like, is this really Bangla?
Yeah, Pichin, I really do understand that problem. I do understand that problem of Bangal and Bangla, which is the difference. And I can't understand either.
Okay.
And Sumit will be my witness. In Bhopal, the Bhopali language, which comes as a joke in films like Sholay, where you have that Surma Bhopali, is a character named Surma Bhopali because he speaks with this accent. And my daughter, who went to Delhi and worked there, there was one more girl from Bhopal, and they would speak in the teacher's room. And they would speak in Bhopali English, Hindi, and it is very different. And it has taken me many years to understand the words. And many of the words are, for example, peda. Peda means tree in Bhopali, but actually peda is a sweet.
Peda is a sweet.
Yeah, peda is a sweet. Ped, Mathura ke ped. Ped, So there are sounds that are so similar in Indian languages that in one region, even if it's the same language, they are calling something by a different name. And this is a very exciting thing about Indian languages. And when I was doing my degree in sociology about 300 years ago, we were told that there are 172 languages and 546 dialects. And I think that count is also increased in the last 300 years that I haven't been studying.
Or maybe they actually did come down because a lot of languages are dying. So.
Can I just explain why I use the linguistic term variety instead of dialect? I think it's probably more a modern trend. But when we say dialect, it sounds as though there is some standard, like the Queen's English or, standard American or standard Australian, which is the norm. And everything else is the dialect of that. Whereas, if we talk about variety, you say even the Queen of England speaks a variety of English.
Yes, yes.
Variety. And
I appreciate your clarification. Thank you.
And there's a famous quote by a German dialectologist from, I think it was the 19th century or, early 20th century, Weinreich, who said that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. I think it's very true. I mean, if you look at Swiss German, it's recognized as a language. But really,
yes, it is.
If it was part of Germany, it would be considered a dialect, right? And
absolutely. There's Swiss French also. There is Swiss Italian also.
Exactly. Yeah, and if you look at the languages of China, for example, linguistically, them are not related, but they are called dialects. If you look at the Okinawan language, the southern islands of Japan. Okinawa was the Ryukyu kingdom for centuries, and linguistically, they were not related to Japanese. They share a similar writing system now, but linguistically they were not. But it's considered officially a dialect, and it's political. So I try to avoid the terms dialect, and I talk about standard and non-standard varieties.
I like that. I will also amend my ways. Thank you so much.
Of course, in general conversation, no one understands if I talk about variety. So I do use the term dialect a lot. But, I think it's important to be aware of the politics behind the way we call these languages or varieties. Sorry to get all political.
No. This is all very, very related, and it is cohesion of the main topic. Absolutely.
I think it's very impossible to separate language and politics because power lies. Words have power, and words in all languages have power. So that is difficult to separate it.
Absolutely. Arigatou gozaimasu.
We have two questions from Varsha. She's asking, can you share how much one can expect as royalty or remuneration for freelance translators in India and for international academic press as an editor?
Okay, very interesting. Okay, so again, it's always a range. So your so royalty again is like I said, if your publisher is agreeing to pay you a royalty, it's usually 5%. But again, there might not all publishers have the royalty arrangement, so it might be an upfront fee that you get paid. So have that discussion before you take on the work. That's the remuneration and the way you're going to get paid, etc., are all very important conversations to have. Remuneration, it can be anything from 50 paisa per word to about 3 rupees per word. Yeah. And for international academic press, I've not really worked with any international academic press as an editor. So if someone else can sort of throw some light on that, that would be nice. Does anyone here know Indian international academic press editing rates? Sorry. I guess you can just ask and find out if you would just ask for an amount and then try your luck.
Yes, here's another question. What kind of how does social class, gender, caste, tribe, and worldview affect translations? Are we moving towards more inclusivity, and how is it addressed by the big publishing houses?
So right now, in terms of inclusivity, I would say that publishing houses are trying to include texts which are from across different. There has been historically in Indian publishing, at least, there has been an interest in gender and social class. Again, we are moving away. It's getting more inclusive. You're trying to get more. I mean, increasingly they're trying to get writers who are from other tribes or castes, and it's not like an upper caste person looking down and commenting on other castes. And so that has definitely changed. There is definitely more uh, inclusivity there. In terms of the translators, again, I think that would take some time in happening. So yeah, I mean, and whether that affects your translations, I'm not sure, because again, I mean, I have always translated as a woman, and as an upper caste woman. I am an upper caste woman, so, and I'm very aware of it. And I guess, yeah, so that always that comes through, I'm guessing. And yeah, but yeah, I mean, I would say, like, having seen some of the translations that my male colleagues do, I think it does sort of inform your work, where you're coming from. So, and yeah, I mean, in terms of whether I mean, publishers as such, we have to, I think it's important to make our peace with one fact, that at the end of the day, they also have to sort of run their organizations. So, I mean, and they, I mean, more and more increasingly, they are trying to sort of factor in these things that are important, which are politically relevant. But I mean, there's, I mean, that balance sheet will always be there. So yeah, I guess I mean, it, again, as if you're trying to pitch your work, do keep that in mind. Do remember, like, be sensitive to that fact too. And again, I mean, I also realized it when I so as the, I mean, we tend to sort of villainize the management and say that they are making money and stuff, but we also need to remember that they also need to keep a little in their kitty, because they have to run a business. And they also, I mean, there are expenses that they have to meet no matter what. Which, so I mean, it's about, I would say, being a freelancer, as a freelancer who's worked, as someone who's started freelancing after having worked with organizations, I would say that that has been one big learning for me. That, I mean, you have to be, the way you expect them to be sensitive to to your situation, I mean, you also have to sort of return, you also have to be equally sensitive to where they are coming from. Be very particular about your deadlines, about I mean, just be sensitive, I would say. Just remember that there are also people out there. They also have to run businesses. They have to pay employees. They have to pay their bills. I mean, and not just their personal bills, but also the bills of the company. So, yeah, don't expect the sun and the moon. I mean, Kanis does, I mean, do you agree with me? I mean, you looked a bit surprised when I said that.
I can identify with the publishing houses wanting certain levels of education or certain years of experience or certain knowledge about the kinds of books you've done. Um, I'm sorry, I don't believe in caste. And I believe
That,
that
yeah.
the more we
That's
believing in caste, that will be a very big jump for that is a very personal feeling. So my reaction was only about saying that you are an upper caste person. I think anybody who is doing good work is upper caste. I refuse to accept the Varna system. And that might be because I didn't grow up in India, I grew up somewhere else. And I didn't want to make any kind of an expression that would disconcert, make you dismayed in any way. But I do believe that it has got to do with our education, our experience, and our abilities. Our skill set is more important to anybody than our caste. And I
definitely, I
hope that
agree with
this
you,
caste
Denise, and it's a very
goes
important.
away as soon as possible.
I mean, it's a very important point that you've made there. I mean, I didn't really mean it in that sense. I meant in this. I mean, I also feel like there is no point in denying where you're coming from and saying that. I mean, I can't deny the fact that I've had a certain kind of education or a certain kind of, education for my family was a priority, and I mean, I could be given a certain kind of an education because of where I came from. So that is definitely there. I mean, what I mean is there is no taking away that, and I'm saying that I'm guessing that does sort of come through in the work that I do. Whereas someone who comes from a different caste or a different place in life or a different place in society would probably approach. I mean, would have a different way of translating or writing, or I mean, their experience. I meant that the experiences are very different. That was all that I was saying there. That, as a woman from a certain space, let me put it that way. I'm coming from a certain space of privilege. It is a privilege. So, and especially in India, so that will inform our work. While someone who's not coming from that privilege would, I mean, their work would reflect it differently. So there is only a difference. That's all. And publishers, yes, but it's also because, and I'm not, I mean, publishers are trying to sort of access those other spaces too, but it will take some time for them to get there. It's a matter of time. So that was the only, I mean, I mentioned the upper caste thing only in that sense. I mean, only in acknowledgement of the privilege I've had.
Thanks, Priyanka. So do we have any more queries, or we close the session, which has been very interesting?
I just wanted to add something, regarding rates. I don't know much about, rates in India, but there's definitely a difference in the way I charge, for example, academics versus universities versus companies. And with translation, it's especially tricky because I charge per word, per character, Japanese character to English. But for example, if I guess it's like editing when you're charging per word as well in English. If someone's given you 100,000 word thesis, or 200,000 character thesis in Japanese, for example, to translate, that's different to translating, for example, a 3-word company name. But if that company is, Uniqlo, for example, and they want me to help them localize them, for the American market, is Uniqlo going to be the right name for this company to be successful in the US or in England or in Australia? Then even though it's just 1 word or 3 words or whatever, that's a big deal. I'm not going to charge them 10 cents per character rate for that. So it's difficult, but with each job, I always consider, how much work is going to be involved in this. For me to come up with a good translation for that company name, it's going to take me days, weeks, maybe, as opposed to just translating a straightforward information focused, research paper in the sciences, lots of facts and figures, not too difficult to translate in that sense, as opposed to, say, for example, a letter, trying to sell something or argue something, convince a client to purchase something. Again, that could be a 1-page letter, but it's going to take me a lot more work than, say, a 10-page research paper, maybe, with straightforward scientific terminology. So these are things that, don't sort of think in terms of just 1 rate per word or, 1 rate per hour, but try to, as you become more
Complexity of the work.
Freelancer, just, quote each client, and you'll have a better idea of how much work it's going to take you, how difficult it's going to be. Yeah.
No, I mean, I just meant it in the sense of the range. But again, like, even as editors, we don't always charge the same.
Exactly.
I mean, it depends on the complexity of the work, or how after you make an assessment of the time it's going to take you, so you try and sort of unpack that and then sort of quote a rate. So of course I'm really sorry if that's what came
Oh,
across. I mean, I meant
no.
it in there is a range for a reason.
And I think also you're probably, thinking more in terms of your literary translation or academic,
I mean, again, like, I mean, I've done both. Also done a lot of commercial work, and again, it really depends on the kind of work that's required. Like, if you're also going to be, if you're also expected to, sort of help with look at the edits and the proofread copy and stuff, and you're going to follow it through the publishing process. Of course, you're going to ask for a. So yes, please don't think that it's about like. Please do make an assessment. And Varsha has also written about my saying the sun and the moon. And I mean, of course, it's not to trivialize anyone's experience or anything, but I'm just speaking from experience. I've seen that. I mean, again, I do not want to sound like someone like whatever, but I've seen that a lot of people, they start out and then they expect to sort of, you have to work towards anything. So just, I mean, and so, I mean, it's just a way, if you remember that, you won't be disappointed, is what I'm saying. The one way to not get disappointed, disheartened, or disillusioned by an experience is to always keep in mind that that it's always a journey and I've seen a lot of writers struggle with the idea too. I mean, you might sort of, your first book might become a hit, but you also have to work towards the second book all over again. It is a clean slate in some ways. So,
and I totally agree with what you said about trying everything, when you first start out. I mean, that's what I did as well. And, some of them were kind of disastrous, but it was great. All, as you say, it's all great experience and informs your work in the end as a translator and editor and wordsmith. So,
or even as a writer, I mean, I've seen that some of the best writing comes from people who have had all kinds of experiences. You might have worked on something that's super corporate, super, you would look at it and go, like, what were you doing thinking, what were you doing writing about machines or technology and stuff? But I mean, you never know, it might just inform your work in some way, like 5 years or 6 years or even 10 years down the line. So yeah, so I would say to all young editors, young translators, young writers, please keep an open mind. And again, like I've been saying this to all my, to even my family, to my cousins and whoever, the universe does not owe you anything. You just need to work. I mean, just work towards it, please. Okay, struggle isn't a bad word. It's okay to struggle a bit. You will get there. And
I don't know how important connections are in India, or how much I can only assume that you place great value on relationships and networks, as we do in Japan. But in Japan, for example, when I was starting out and trying everything, if I found someone that I like to work with or work for, a great client, then I put a special effort into that relationship, and then ask for referrals, and then my network just expanded from there. And being just one person as a freelancer, I can't take every single job out there. So I want to focus on the people that I really enjoy working with, the people who treat me well, and then they recommend people to me who also treat me well. Because in Japan, if someone recommends me, I have to make sure that I treat that customer well, because that customer is friends with my other customer, and that entire relationship is very, very important. And my clients know that they can trust me to look after their friend or their colleague or their business partners. So I don't know if it's the same in India. I can only guess it might be similar, but focus on the good people in your life and create your own special network, because you can't just market yourself to the entire world, even though you do in the beginning, but it gradually grows, and you can establish a very solid foundation from there, and you won't have to sort of just take whoever happens to knock on your door.
Yeah, and I mean, Indian publishing is also definitely an ecosystem, and it can be a very full ecosystem. But again, like anything, you also have to, I mean, you also have to do your bit and nurture those relationships. You also have to make sure that you treat them with respect and sense. Again, I mean, I would come back to the point of being sensitive to the other person. Just remember that they also have deadlines, they have schedules, they have, so just be sensitive. And yeah, definitely, like those relationships. I mean, if someone is recommending you, yes, that, I mean, recommending you is your friend, work extra hard for them. Jyoti doesn't seem very convinced.
No, I have that. I think I've spoken to you personally also a couple of times about this. I find large trade publishing in India, the big guys, it's an extremely incestuous bunch. They live within themselves, and I'm talking about, and I'm talking about especially the Delhi caucus because I know that. I don't know the other cities, and I have been in and out of that space. So I am a little circumspect about this thing. So that's why probably I was kind of smiling away. And so that's my personal view. Everybody doesn't have to be. So I think it's a very small world actually. So entry for people can be very difficult, especially even for the youngsters. This is my view. But then, I have a very, I'm already 47 and I've got a hard-headed view about things.
Yes,
So,
you do.
yeah, I do. Yeah, you know that, personally, because I know you for some time now. So that's my only this thing, sort of submission. And I have kind of faced that kind of issue. And I don't think my work is bad. My communication is not that great, which I worked on. I'm just talking. So forget about forget about youngsters. I am somebody who's been there in the city for so long, and I'm very well connected actually. If somebody sees my profile, but I've faced a huge lot of sort of barriers because the city is run by the beautiful people. So you have to, and publishing is, I'm very blunt about this, and publishing is full of beautiful people, especially here. Extremely elitist, extremely elitist. So these are my personal views. So, it doesn't have to sort of, other people can have other views. So that's it. Fair enough. So that's all, really. So nothing else. Just making a point since you brought it.
You can always try putting some kajal and mascara.
Huh?
You can always try putting some kajal and mascara.
Beautiful.
Beautify.
Wait a minute.
Beautify.
Listen. When I say beautiful people, I don't mean women. By beautiful people, I mean there is this caucus of certain kind of elite people. I don't just mean women there, please. I just want to make a point. No. There's a lot of men involved in there also. Okay.
But so, I don't know. I've never really faced. I mean,
you have never faced that. You have often said, like you say, Delhi has been good to you. Fair. Delhi has been very good.
Really kind to me.
Delhi has been very good to me also. I've lived here for 25 years. I still keep living here, though I keep living in other cities also. I have that privilege now, thankfully, to get out of Delhi. But I have faced, and these are things, personal stuff, so I don't want to bring it out here at all. But it is an extremely elitist. And you ask, I have attended.
I mean, just don't let it affect you. I mean, at the end of the day.
No, it's not affected me. Oh, please, I talk like this has not affected me. I'm in a very good place out there. But since you said, I wanted to bring it in because that's also important. Because, that's where all those questions come in. See, if you ask if you ask the Dalit writers, and I'm not a great expert on all that. I have attended a few meets here and there to see what happens. They all have, what should I say? They all feel that, I'm talking especially about Delhi, entry into those, what should I say? The literary agencies, the crowds, and the certain bookshops and the certain, I can lay out a whole grid right now. I can give a whole lecture on that, where I spent years studying
I would say the reason for that is, I would say again, it's the balance sheet thing kicking in. More than the elitism, it's also about the connections. A lot of these people are also very well connected. So when when you take on a so the reasoning for that is the logic behind that is if you take someone from a certain kind of a family or a certain kind of situation. Okay, Vivek. Yes, Vivek, just give me 2 minutes. 2 minutes for that, just to make that point. So yeah, the again, it's about connections, and can you get like certain kind, can you get those big writers? So that's all that publishers really care about. It's the balance sheet. Can you get those saleable writers? If you say, uh, huh. So, I mean, if you say that I can also get, a certain kind of writers, these are my connections and everything, I don't think publishers would really care about where you're coming from in terms of class or caste or wherever. But yeah,
Yeah, but those names won't be brought in. The Shashi Tharoors of the world won't be brought in by certain kind of people. So
I mean,
that's the game.
how many people can get a Shashi Tharoor anyway?
This is just
Like maybe four people in the entire
the name
industry,
just
but there
suddenly
are
came
other
up to
people who
me.
are also
Yeah,
getting
but
hired.
ma'am, we all agree that there's a lot of people who gets, even writers who don't come in into the, So let's say even, let's say Yoda. Yoda's doing a great. That's where the translation keeps things comes in.
Hmm.
It's like a lot of interesting stuff does come in. Okay,
And it's
that
a
sort
small
of thing.
press, it's not a big press.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So that I'm just giving a. I just thought I'll make this
Hmm.
point about this. I always felt it's a very,
Hmm.
very closed this thing, and that's where I have often I found an extremely in the last 1 year.
Hmm.
After I started attending the ICF meets, I actually found a far more diverse group online than I found in the pubs of Delhi. Okay,
Definitely, the pubs are not the place.
or whatever, all the whatever this Delhi. You know what,
The pubs of
Priyanka,
Delhi are
you know.
only for.
You know what I'm talking about. So, and I'm sure a lot of the people here, they also know what I'm talking about.
But
The
listen, just
diversity,
saying
the diversity.
a lot of that also comes from wanting to be one. It's again like it's again if you're open to all kinds of experiences, you will. I mean, that's I've never thought, oh, I need to be in this space. This is the space I want.
Okay,
So I
that's a
think
nice
that is what has
point.
really informed my uh, position, or the fact that I've never really felt like I've lost out on opportunities. I mean,
Because
I
as
just
I
I saw the opportunities that I was getting, or the ones I was working towards, and basically just make the most of that and have your own journey. I would say don't try to compare
No,
your.
of course, that's exactly what's there, and that's what I'm saying. So let's say an ICF kind of thing. Suddenly, this is just I'm just. So what happens suddenly? You meet a whole range of editors. I'm not talking about writers. Cracking good editors I have met in the last 1 year through ICF, and it's incredible. They're not part of the large publishing caucus, but they're doing
Hmm,
terrific work, and they're out there all over the country. I have names here which Vivek knows, because Vivek and me are on this every day because it's one of my favorite topics now. But as I'm saying, so there's a hell of a lot out there, which
yeah, definitely.
in India. But that's why, see, vernacular publishing, that's why probably is more interesting. But many of us Angreji walas, we don't reach the vernacular publishing. That's where the translation bridge is a very interesting bridge, because there's
Hmm.
a lot of work happening in the local languages, which many of I don't read. Unfortunately, it's a big problem with me. Only bhasha I know is Angrezi really. I can read Bangla and all a little bit. Hindi to it's gone haywire. So I'm just saying. So I think it's a very closed world, the publishing this thing out there, and the big publishing houses which are got the money, they all have a certain kind of group who keep shifting between each other. That's why I call them the
But that's
beautiful
because
people.
those are the people with access to a certain kind of writers. You don't have to. There are other editors or other publishers too. So I mean,
Possible.
you
You're
don't.
probably coming from the
I mean,
business
I would
side
say
of
don't
things,
let
ma'am.
that bother you. Don't let that affect
No, no, no.
you.
It's not
Let
bothering me.
them
I'm
do
just
their
making.
own shit of like 1 lakh.
Priyanka, I talk like this, but I'm not bothered. I'm just making a comment here.
Yeah.
That's
So
it.
I mean, I'm also making a comment. There
Oh,
are
fair, sure, sure. Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
was
yeah.
just saying, don't
Agreed.
bother
Yeah,
about it.
fair. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's it. That's
Let
it.
them do their thing, and you do
Varsh,
yours.
Varsha, who is attending this, she asked what is ICF. So ICF is Indian Copy Editors Forum. It's a Facebook group for editors and other editorial professionals. And we have been like having these webinars since 10th of May. And we have the travel series Break Free on Saturdays. So, Sarah, I saw some birds in the background, and our next session is going to be on bird watching. So, I hope you will join
Really?
that. So, I hope you will join that one,
I will
and
try. Yeah.
we can ask our presenter to identify the dead birds that you have. And next Sunday's session will be by Esther Bardhan, ICF member, and the topic will be author-editor relationships. So that's going to be another interesting topic. And today we had very valuable inputs from Sarah as a participant, and next month she is going to present a session for us. So we will look forward to that. And thanks, Priyanka, for the presentation today, and a big thanks to all the participants for a very interactive conversation that happened after the presentation. And we will see you next Saturday at 4 p.m. and next Sunday at 11 a.m. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good to see you. Stay safe, stay well.
Thank you, everyone.